Hello kids, it's your favourite witches from the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. Have we got a treat for some of you today? Because we're talking about love. So some people are in love, the rest of you are just lonely with a box of tissues. So, on today's subject of love, I thought that I would start with a love reading because, of course, if anyone's ever worked as a professional psychic, they would all know that it's all about the love reading. Is he thinking of me? What does he think of me? Is there another woman? All of that sort of stuff.
Is he coming back?
Is he coming back?
Why did he leave?
He left me a couple of decades ago, but I still stare looking at the front door. And then when the postman comes, I jump up out of my chair thinking, it's him, only to be disappointed every day apart from Sundays. So, with that, obviously some of you who follow us on Facebook, on the Thoth Witchcraft Facebook page, you may be aware that we've been doing Fanny Cranach wisdom cards readings every day. So with that in mind, we're going to see what wisdom Fanny Cranach has for you. I want you to pick a number between 1 and 3. So you're going to be picking a number 1 or 2 or 3. Okay, have you got that, everyone? Good, go. Right. No, you don't need to tell me your number. Obviously, you just think about that, okay? Now, whoever picked the number 1, the card Fanny has for you is the Jack of Diamonds. And that means, as she says, you've fucked up someone's relationship. So there's a nice little card for you home wreckers out there. For those that have picked card number 2, you have the 8 of spades. And your wisdom is, you need a distraction. A one-night stand is what you need. There we go. Fanny is full of the wisdom, or Fanny Cranach. For those, of course, that picked option number 3, the Queen of Diamonds. Someone wants to get their leg over. Well, it's all rather sexual this week, which, you know, Valentine's Day and all that on the horizon. I mean,
would be.
There's some passion, you know. I thought all of them were legitimate, fairly linked to love. If you want to have a little look at the Fanny Cranach wisdom cards, then you can go on the thothwitchcraft.com website and go buy some. If not, then you can just listen to the rest of us blab on about love magic today, isn't it? So, you know,
he loves
love
me.
spells,
He
Chris.
loves me not.
And possibly love divination. So there we go. We got the advertising out of the way.
Yeah, we never normally do that, but I think we should do more of it, to be honest.
We need to do more adverts, don't we?
Yeah. You need to buy more of the stuff that we lovingly make for you all. See what I did there? See what I did?
Yeah. Right, so love magic. Obviously, there's the stereotypical, well, you shouldn't be casting spells to make someone fall in love with you and all that jazz. But people often share these Facebook memes that instruct people to do that. But why is that? Can you construct a spell that will force someone to love you? And if you can, then why shouldn't you do it?
Well, of course you can, but the problem is those tend to be ensnarement or entrapment spells. Because
You mean like the Fanny Cranach trouser snake snare kit that's going on sale also soon on the thothwitchcraft.com website?
Hey, everyone, we've been working really hard for you lot.
Or is that something a little different?
It's
I don't think there's much love there, is it?
Well, it depends on your perspective of what you consider love to be, I guess. Some people argue it's just a set of hormones and serotonin, isn't it? And the rest of them think, oh, it's some deep twin flame stuff. Oh, should we cover that later?
We've got to cover the twin flames. I don't know. Love making surely is just a slightly slower mode. You know, it's like the first setting on your vibrator. It's just kind of like a very slow kind of kind of thing. Whereas you kick it up a little bit of notch when it moves to fucking. That's more like option number 10, you know, something like that, where you don't just get you get kind of like a like that sort of thing. Yeah. I don't know, maybe that's just me.
And at what point are we going to start selling magical vibrators then, Liam? Because you seem to know a lot about them.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's a nice little crystal dildo collection in there. I'm gonna have to click the explicit tab this week, aren't I? When we upload this episode, I'm gonna have to click the explicit button. I try to avoid it by doing all of the, bleeping out your swear words and that.
My swear words, I haven't said a single thing.
Not on this episode, but if you count the tally up, not that I'm tallying these things, but if you count the tally up,
Everybody knows you're
then
keeping score. Like,
it looks it
everybody
looks
knows.
as it looks as if I started being a little bit sweary on the first couple of episodes, and my leaderboard was well up. But then when you got lulled into a false sense of security and started swearing more, I kind of backed off and let you overtake.
Hey, in my book, there's only one swear word, and that's the W word. But we move
What,
on.
Wicca?
Oh,
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on swiftly because we don't want this to be a Wiccan bashing episode. So yeah, you were explaining to us about the process of casting a magical spell that would force someone to love you.
Yes. So we
So
were talking about magical entrapment.
yes, that's it. Magical
So
entrapment.
magical
A
entrapment.
lover's snare.
A lover's snare. Well, you can always use not magic for this. This one's always a good one. If you're gonna catch big prey, then obviously a good rope is always a good use. But yeah, the
And
problem.
does the rope girth factor in? Does girth factor in?
Oh God, he's back to magical dildos again. This is supposed to be about love.
I'm sorry,
It's
I
supposed
just
to be
don't
about
understand
love,
the
not about
difference.
sex.
Isn't
Sorry.
it the same thing?
Oh, poor guy.
One's
poor
just
guy.
more commitment. One, the commitment lasts until sunrise. The other, the commitment lasts until one of you dies. Isn't that how it works? Or you can, put them in a home or something.
But yeah, so the big one, I think the big one for most people is getting round I suppose, ethics. We won't go too much into that, but lots of people get hung up on the ethics of whether or not they should use love magic, because at the end of the day, the majority of it is some level of mind control, isn't it? It's about either using glamours in order to attract, or all sorts of attraction spells that are designed to draw people in. Those are all versions of mind control and affecting someone else's reality, or making a change to your projection in order to essentially ensnare passers-by, which I suppose is only the same as people who cake on lots of makeup or have Botox or like to go to the gym 6 times a week in order to attract another. The difference is you can stay as ugly as you were before, but just put a good glamour on or use a good entrapment spell. So whereas the difference is, I guess, with lots of people is they have an obsession with what love is, I guess, as an emotion.
They're in love with the ideal of love.
Yeah, definitely. They're most definitely in love with the idea of love, or what love represents. And I think the biggest example of that is going to be Aphrodite, isn't it? Really, is where people get ensnared by what her outside projection, where actually people think that she represents love in this kind of doting, caring way, whereas Aphrodite is the goddess of procreation. Essentially, she's a goddess of physical love making.
You're saying she's a dirty
and
bitch.
Obviously the F word. I did not say that at all.
What about
I did not say
Aphrodite's
that at all.
son then? With the little arrows.
But what? Yeah, Eros is very different. But that's down to a slightly more modern concept of what she is. He doesn't exist in a lot of the earlier versions, and he's a separate deity altogether if you go far enough back.
But in terms of the two different ideals of love and the falling in love process and stuff like that.
Yeah, so with Eros is more about everlasting, that kind of notion of pairing of people for long
Twin
term,
flame.
which I suppose is
Twin
why
flame.
twin
Is he my
flame.
twin flame?
Yeah, that
That
stuff.
stuff.
That stuff. But yeah, it's kind of. But you can explain twin flame. Go on.
Oh,
You normally like to set me up. There you go.
you've
I've
set
just
me
set
up.
you up
I don't. I've had a taste of my own medicine, and I tell you what, it tastes sour. I don't much like it. Not very loving.
with a little bit
It's
of
a bit bitter,
bitterness. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so twin flames. So twin flames, this whole new age concept of the fact that obviously you're incomplete and that you require someone else who will love you and be your other half. So twin flame is this
Yes.
idea that this other half is too,
That you're
yeah,
incomplete.
basically
You are incomplete until you find this
A,
other
that you're
half.
incomplete, but also on a soul level or a metaphysical level, you're also incomplete. And that the twin flame is the other part of your soul. Generally, that's how the New Agers would see it. So it goes into it's a little bit taking the concept of soulmates further, because a lot of people think that that's the idea of soulmates, whereas soulmates is really just
Yeah.
souls that
Groups of souls that move
move
together.
together, yeah, like a herd or a
Good,
school.
good
Like in
and bad.
a
Good and
school
bad.
year, you go through your
Yeah.
GCSEs together, that sort of thing. Whereas twin flames more of this idea of a missing part of yourself, the energetic and polar opposite to you that attracts, and that you form this new wonderful amazing thing and have little babies and stuff. So yeah, twin flame theory. How do you? So that's basically the concept of it. There's all of these. It tends to be lonely women, from my experience when I used to work as a psychic. It was all a case of they're obsessed with, is this man my twin flame? I like him, but if you're going to say that he's not my twin flame, I'm going to get rid of him immediately and move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Basically,
Which is always the worrying bit. I don't get why people do this to themselves, of this constant cycle of I need to find a man, then divine his future if his future is good or bad for me, then get rid, and then divine to find the next one, and you're just kind of like, okay, well you're stuck in this loop where you're constantly asking other people as to whether or not you should keep this person around, which is what is a very bizarre concept to me, I guess. But then I trust my instincts. I think that's probably the difference.
and I'm a cold-hearted bastard. So the whole idea of all of this doesn't quite compute with us. It doesn't necessarily work on a um, energetic way from in terms of the work that we do, bearing in mind we can take souls apart and analyze them in a slightly more detail than what you would find in the average book, particularly in the self-help section, which is where a lot of these concepts come from, the self-help section of Waterstones or Barnes and Noble.
But then we had a great teacher, Fanny Cranach,
Fanny
so
Cranach.
she knows all there needs to know about the men's and the women's. But yeah, I think I probably need to add a disclaimer there that says it's not that I don't believe in love. Love is a very powerful energy
Well, of course, it comes in
source.
many
I
forms as
just,
well, doesn't it? The love of a
but
child is
I,
different.
yeah, I think people get so tied up with this kind of um, the
Yeah.
one, which I suppose is a Christian idea. This a bit tied, till death do us
Yeah.
part rubbish. Um, Whereas I don't compute very well with that. To me, love lasts as long as it does. The only kind of love that lasts forever is that a mother's love for her child, kind of thing.
Well, and even
Like
that,
you don't,
there's a lot of mothers that don't like their kids. Some parents,
you
some
don't have to
parents,
like them to
some
love them.
parents eat their kids. Remember back to
Or at least
that.
that's what my mom tells me.
Yeah. Some parents eat their kids, as you might remember from other podcast episodes.
Well, sometimes there are too many, and you just need to. There are too many mouths to feed, and then you're like, okay, I've got a good idea. I'll eat one of them. I think that's a brilliant solution to that problem. But yeah, I think people get tied up with, rather than seeing the love current for what it is, that kind of the aspects that weave in, the complexity that falls within the Venusian, or the Venetian or Venusian, or however you would say it, is so complex that actually I think they try too hard to pin it down to one thing or another. I think with the twin flame situation, it's kind of, it's that evolvement, isn't it, of the new age taking something that is common and repackaging it, which seems to happen a lot, which is that, is this idea of there is somebody for everybody kind of process. What they don't mention is obviously, well, that other person could spend the entire of your life on the other side of the planet and you never cross paths. But they kind of skip that bit of the book of, well, if you happen to pull yourself to the wrong, seem unlucky enough to pull yourself to the wrong part of the world when you decide to manifest, when you decide to be born here, that's down to bad planning. Whereas you get all these new ages going, oh no, the energy of attraction would pull you two together, like, it doesn't matter where they're born in the world, like they'd find you. You're like, okay, well, they need to have the money in order to do so, and the inclination to pick up and travel and move to a part of the world that is completely foreign to them, where they don't know the language, and I just don't see how that. But then I don't have the same concept of fate, I suppose, as most do. And I've gone off on a tangent.
Well, let's bring it back then. Let's bring it back to more adult ideas of love, because what we've kind of expressed with the twin flame thing is that teenage, new, young love, your first love, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So let's talk in terms of about love and developing relationships, because there's some uncomfortable ground when it comes to love that a lot of people don't want to follow. One is, why is it that you love someone? If you're forcing someone to love you, or creating some sort of synthetic love, love's really supposed to be organic. It's about two people or more potentially coming together and experience this emotion and wanting to create a union and a partnership with the other person. Now, when it comes to the changes, think about that, because people don't like to break that down. Why do I love that person?
No.
I don't know. I just feel it. It's a feeling in my heart. It breaks when they have to go away, blah, 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 blah. And basically think about people that fall out of love. Now, people love for actual reasons. And when it comes to the magical community, particularly when you've got someone on a magical path and they're really evolving, they will change as a person. And that kind of is the concept of, well, what about falling in and out of love with someone, and the people which they get divorced or they stop loving the other person because they've changed, either that other person changed or they've changed themselves. And it's the fact that you've evolved beyond that. You were at one point sharing a path, then something happens, they've changed and they're a different person, not the man or woman you fell in love with, blah, 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 blah. To force something to love you is synthetic. So it's not real.
Yeah.
And I know that it doesn't really matter in terms of, well, if you want to go to bed with someone on an evening and snuggle up, all you care about is a warm body that tells you and whispers sweet nothings in your ear. But in terms of love the process,
get an electric blanket.
You could get an electric blanket or a gigolo. I mean, it depends how much money you've got.
They'll make yeah. And a good one will make you feel like you love them. So it's
well, a good
fine.
gigolo will feel like an electric blanket, and a good electric blanket will make you think, why am I spending money on a gigolo? So, but maybe we're just old. But yeah, there we go. So yeah, adult ideas of love, falling in and out of love with someone. I think the key concept with forcing someone else to love you is that you get the loving feelings from them.
Yeah, but I think a large part of it is still the fact that, is that pressure. There is that societal pressure still that you find somebody, you get married, you have children, etc. So I suppose for us we're quite lucky, because not being in the straight brackets mean we're allowed
we're on
to
the crooked
bend
path,
those rules
in more ways than one.
Yeah, keep that PKTW stuff to yourself, okay? Um, so
Well, I
yeah, so
think
is
that
that
our
kind of
Keldon might also be on the crooked path, if I'm honest with you, but one should never be stereotypical about such things.
one should never be
Yes, that's
presumptuous.
right.
The But there is that kind of part of it that is, is that pressure of those milestones, isn't it? That lots of people gauge how well they are doing based on those. And I can imagine it's quite difficult for people when they're comparing themselves to their peers constantly. I suppose in some ways that's what I quite love about not being part of the norm. That allows me to kind of go, well, actually, that's I'm not Christian. I'm not of those kind of Abrahamic religions. I don't believe love works in that way. Um, I don't believe in stuck for one for life kind of thing. Love should grow and change as it grows. And whether that is that love changes in a way that you guys don't love each other in the same way anymore, then at that point, you can go your separate ways without it breaking down and being monstrous. Um, I think what tends to be the hardest bit for most people is when there are children
Yeah.
involved. I suppose I've got the luxury of not having that, and therefore, you know, there is no complication there. You're not having to factor in these additional bodies. And I imagine lots of people that go chasing love magic, because a lot of them are these middle-aged women that are unhappy.
They buy the
Um,
Titiana book, the nice,
Buy the
the
Tatiana
velvet
book and
covered,
kind of go,
cringy, nasty stuff.
yes, the one you're banned from
And
throwing at
and they
people.
always buy
Um,
crystals and put it in their husband's socks and pants drawer, or steal some of his socks. That's always a popular one, isn't it?
yeah. Whereas actually, the biggest answer is, the biggest part of that is probably, okay, well, it's not working anymore. Why is it not working? Do you need to be apart? Do you need to try something new? And, by that point in life, people are too entangled, aren't they? They have their own house, they have the house together, they're happy, they're in their cycle. And at which point, it's a case of, do you want to try and force it to rekindle something? So a lot of love magic is in that kind of, is rekindling, isn't it? Is trying to restart that flame back up again.
Well, I tell you why it's not working.
I
It's because that little magical padlock spell that you did and stuck on that bridge on your honeymoon, the local council officers come along and with a bunch of bolt cutters and
Bolt
cut them
cutters.
all off, and now you've fallen out of love with your partner. I mean, come on. I mean, seriously. I mean, that does evolve from a magical perspective, but that is in that charm thing is in the Titiana book. I mean, come on. You're telling
Yes.
people to bind their love of their partner to a padlock and stick it on a bridge somewhere. You think that someone's not going to come
Yeah.
along and break that padlock?
So, but yeah, it's one of those where people force their ideals on it because they've got this twisted idea about how the energy stream works. Um, and yeah, is it all a complete waste of time?
I don't think when it comes to emotion that anything's really a waste of time. Of course, there are some people with no emotion, though. We call those people psychopaths. So, it is one of those things that life is not all about emotion. Life is the meaning of life is. Well, we'll give away the meaning of life after the watershed in the Patreon. Remind me, I'll tell everyone what the actual meaning of life is. We can say that because we're super witches, you see.
Of
We've been
course,
labelled
of
as super
course.
witches too many times. I think I'm going to start adopting that mantle.
We're just
I
accepting it
used to
now.
say professional witch because that was the closest thing to what you could say our witchcraft is comprised of, taking money and helping people with magical work. But now I think that I've been called a
Yeah,
super witch, much like I never used to call myself a witch until everyone started calling me a witch because you can't escape that. Well, now in these Facebook groups, I can't escape being called a super witch. So I think I'm going to adopt that term now.
I'll get you a cape for your big birthday this year.
Yeah, let's draw a line under that, and we'll move on swiftly from that.
I'll get you a super witch cape.
So it's
It'll be red velvet.
red velvet. And will it be like
Red
an
velvet cape.
SW, like the kind of Superman? Yeah?
Yeah,
Cool.
definitely.
I'd love it. Thank you very much. Anyway, moving on,
It might.
moving on quickly. What sort of love magic do you think is acceptable then? What do you think is actually going to help someone if they were on the search for love? And don't say a fucking charm bag for fuck's sake.
No, actually, my answer would be actually more about, and you're going to
Is
hate
it
this
planting
because
a
it's so new
tree or
agey.
something?
It's so new agey. Is a case of self-love work.
Or
I think
masturbation?
really, no, not everything is about that. He needs to be loved, everybody. I think what you
I
all
need
need
some
to
love. Show
do
me some
is
love.
go out to your closest witchy store, buy him some some rose quartz, and write and write Liam's name on them and send him lots of love, because I think he's forgotten what love feels
If
like.
you are going to buy rose
Um,
quartz, make sure you buy them from the Thoth Witchcraft website, because I'll love you even more for that, because I get some of the money for that. I don't want you buying rose quartz and giving your money to some crappy Glastonbury store and then sending me a bunch of crappy rose quartz crystals, thank you. I mean, if you're going to do it, I can be bought.
quite easily.
Yes, hence my OnlyFans.
Sorry, people. I can't believe
For
you just
the
said
older
that.
members that
Anyway,
don't know what OnlyFans are, it's a bit like Patreon.
but the pictures are
Yeah,
different,
much different. You get more interaction.
more
You
personal.
get more personal interaction.
They're more personal. No, what I was going to say was, um, and which is worse than what you just said, is that essentially, I feel good love magic starts with self love. So is the fact that actually, until you are able to actually appreciate everything that you are, and I think anybody that is chasing their twin flame needs to stop, take a good look at themselves and remind themselves of why they should have somebody else. Do they really need somebody else? And I think the second that most people get to that point where they start to love themselves really well, that projects
Yeah,
outwards. And I think that then shines out, and actually people see the best you at that point. And then that way you're going to find someone that appreciates you for you, because they can see that. Whereas when you're putting all this work into a false set of you, and then wondering why, when you actually snare that guy that you think you want, it doesn't work, on the basis that they never knew you to begin with. You're all facade. Those new teeth and those new tits are not going to make, and all that Botox you stuck in your face, you know, is going to make you look as emotionless on the outside as you are on the inside. Um, so, is that case of, well, actually, work on that. I think the problem most people go for is they want to do work on other people, because other people are the problem. Where actually mostly, have a little look closer to home and actually make the changes that need to be made. Um, if you start to love yourself, maybe other people will then start to love you too. So that is the exercise regime that makes you feel better, or put better food inside yourself so that you feel good on the inside. Start to do all those sorts of things, and then we'll talk about putting plants in the ground and growing trees.
okay. Well, that's some wise words there. And yeah, it does sound a little bit new agey when you kind of say, how can you expect anyone else to love you if you don't love yourself? But at the end of the day, I think there is truth to that. That's the closest thing
Yeah.
to me admitting that there's some elements of truth in the new ages you'll get. I hope you're going to take this as a sound bite, because that's literally the closest thing to adopting new age philosophy as you're going to get from me. So obviously we're almost out of time. On the next section after the watershed, we'll discuss breaking people up because that's part of love magic. But
Yeah.
for everyone,
Yeah, we love that
yeah, for
stuff.
everyone else, we're gonna have to say goodbye now. So goodbye to the regular listeners.